Hi there, everyone. Happy Wednesday. My name is Jenn Walker Wall. I'm the founder of Work Wonders Careers, and I'm hopping on here today to talk a little bit about how we help professionals pursue mission aligned work and what a job search needs to look like, what your job search potentially needs to look like to create opportunities that are compelling and aligned with your skills and interests and values. So if you are here and it's your first time joining us live or watching us live, thank you so much. We always appreciate your trust. And if you are watching the replay, feel free to skip forward a minute or two while I just give folks a minute to join us. So I hop on here a few times a month just to share some really actionable tips for professionals and job seekers. Here at Work Wonders, we tend to work with mission-driven professionals to help them navigate change in their own career, including resume writing, career coaching, career strategy. So if you're not familiar with us, if you're not on our mailing list, we'd love to have you. You can visit us at workwonderscareers.com. Oops, let me get to my comments here. Hey, Pam, nice to see you. Thanks for joining me today. So we're going to talk about mission-aligned careers today. And the reason that this has always been important to me personally, alignment between what I want to do, how I want to feel, and what I want my contributions to be, that's always been really critical to me. And when I started Work Wonders Careers, I knew that it would be important to the people that we are working with as well. And so one of the things that's been really interesting in the last couple of years is to see actually how important having that kind of alignment is for most people now. We've seen the power that being employed or having a good employer can make on our quality of life, how much safety we have at work, how much growth we have at work, how much fulfillment we have at work. And so I was doing a little research today. Normally I don't want to say I wing these things, but I can talk about the job search in my sleep pretty much. But I was doing a little research today because I was really curious about, this shift, right? And so in August, 2.9% of the workforce left their jobs, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. I mean, that's almost like 3% of workers quit their job. And another survey suggested that up to 50% of Americans want to make a career change. And so I think given the centrality of work, at least in American life, I think it's really fascinating what's happening right now as people are really demanding, people are demanding that employers align and act in congruence with their stated values. And so that's really what I think about when I think about mission alignment, is because I'm not just talking about nonprofit professionals or the nonprofit industry. I'm really talking about, what is the mission of your organization? Who are they helping, and how much harm are they causing, incidentally, in their journey to have their mission? And what I've seen happen is, there's sort of like this cottage industry of, top 50 places to work, or 100 best places to work, or best places to work in your city. And so we start to have a sense of like, what is a good place to work at, that's really driven by PR and not by people's actual experiences. And what I've heard over the years from clients is how they are looking for congruence between what their employer says they want to do, how they say they want to treat people, how they want people to feel at work, and how we actually feel at work when we work there. So how people are compensated, how flexible their work schedules are, how much paid leave they might get for medical or family leave, how diverse the organization is. People don't just want to hear that the business or that the organization is mission oriented. They want to know, how do you make that happen? And the bigger the congruence between how those people feel and the more messaging that's coming out in these organizations about the good they're doing or how great it is to work there, the worse it is. It's like a real lack of integrity. And I think that's what a lot of people are picking up on. And they really just don't want to kind of continue to play into that, which I personally think is pretty great. There's a lot of power, I think, for people to work in a place and advocate for their values to be operationalized there. But today, what I really want to focus on is how you can operationalize a job search that's going to help cultivate opportunities that are mission aligned, that align with your values and your needs. And so I'm hoping that this will mean a few things for your job search. So, we have worked to help people land a job that's a great fit. That's the language we use quite a bit. We don't advocate or hang our hat on, being the fastest job search. We don't advocate sending out applications everywhere. We don't want people, as much as possible, job searching from a place of urgency, right? Like we really want to help people cultivate opportunities that align. And that is a whole other, can of worms. It looks very different than other job search strategies sometimes. It's really about taking the long view so that the work we do in this process cultivates both short-term and long-term rewards. And we want to be able to cultivate opportunities that we actually want to accept, because one of the most common challenges over here is actually that people are cultivating opportunities they're not excited about. So it's a really interesting dilemma. And so I want to just kind of break down what I see as really critical to that today. And so the first thing where we spend a lot of time with our clients, and there's a lot of layers to this piece, is really understanding what a mission aligned organization or company would look like for you. Like, what does that mean? It's not going to be the same for everyone. This is, I think, so important because, some people are at the beginning of their careers, some are in the middle, some are at their end, some have families, some are single, some want work to be, an all-consuming adventure, some want it to be something they can clock in and out of. And so it really is key that job seekers start and figure out, what would it look like to have a job where you feel aligned? Like, what would that mean? And a lot of times people come to me and they're like, I'm all over the place and I don't know what I want. And, I'm overwhelmed and I need you to help me explore all of my career options. But when I actually ask them about like things they don't want or things they do want and things they want to do and things they don't want to do, or things they want to experience and things they don't want to experience, they fail to see how much clarity they actually have in that. Like, to me, that is career clarity. So obviously we want to do some reflection here and really get clear on the kinds of experiences and work and, missions that we might want to be attached to. And that looks like normal basic job search stuff, of course. But I think it also looks like doubling down on some other different pieces here. So why is it important to have this level of clarity for yourself in this process? Because it's how we're going to select and prioritize roles and potential employers as we're going through the application process. There's only so many, there's time is finite here, right? There's only so many roles you can apply for in any given week. And so we sort of use this sense of clarity to prioritize on a micro level the kinds of things that we'll put ourselves forward for. You also just want to be able to let people know what you're looking for, what matters to you at this particular juncture in your career. And so if you can't articulate that, then it's hard to engage your network to help you. So I want you to really think about what kinds of opportunities are you asking people to put in front of you? And sometimes it's really about the nature of the work. Like, I would really love to continue my work in development. I want to be in a fundraising office. And sometimes it's like, I'm really flexible about the kind of work I would do, but I have to leave every day at 3 and pick up my kids from school, right? So you have to get really clear about where you are in your journey and what you need here. I think it would also be really helpful, if there are multiple threads or pathways that you're pursuing, to understand what is the common skill set that you're leveraging, so that you can really speak to that more broadly. So we sometimes use the word themes in Work Wonders is to kind of break down the different pieces of skill sets that you might have. And so understanding those broader themes, instead of having to list out every single skill you might have, being able to speak to problem solving or consensus building or presentations or communication or those sorts of things can be really helpful and consolidate some of your interests, and help you find sort of more commonalities in the roles that you're looking for. You also want to be able to ask questions in an interview. And so having a good sense of what it is that you need will help inform the questions that you ask. One of the questions I get asked most often is, what should I ask? And the question I always ask back is what do you need to know to say yes to this? I think that that's a really critical and often overlooked piece, is people are trying to ask the right questions instead of asking the questions that make the most sense for them. And, I'm a big believer that like a job search has to have boundaries and constraints. We can't do all of the things at the same time. We have to set some clear priorities, and getting really clear on what you're not willing to tolerate, what you do want to pursue, what would make you really excited, what you are curious about. That's going to really give you something to pursue. It's going to energize you and motivate you. Sometimes it's easier to have most of the time, it's easier to have a job search when you're really compelled by something versus like when you're really just bored or burned out or resentful of something. So the more you can kind of cultivate the vision of what you're trying to pursue, I find that the energy and motivation is a little bit easier to find for your job search. And so I think there's a couple of reasons people resist this kind of work. One is they're afraid that their expectations are too high. So like I'm trying to like psych them up for kinds of jobs that don't exist. And or it's kind of adjacent, that there simply won't be like enough opportunities that check all of their boxes perfectly, and that they won't be able to cultivate any opportunities as a result of narrowing their limiting sort of what they're focusing on here. So I want you to kind of think about your, hey, Jen, nice to see you. I want you to kind of think about what it is that you are asking for here, because I very rarely see people who have like way out of control expectations for their job search. So here's how I think about this list of things that we want and things that we don't want, or your sense of career clarity here, which is must-haves and nice-to-haves, right? Like those are both good to have in your job search process. What are some things that are non-negotiable for you at this particular juncture? And what are some things that you are negotiable on? So tease those apart a little bit. Another piece of this is like, how close can we get to, having an ideal job and getting all those things on the list? If we're not super clear on what it is that we're pursuing, then we could pursue all kinds of opportunities that really don't make sense. But if we can get clear and we can provide the constraints on our job search that allow us to focus on like the most compatible, most aligned roles, who knows what kind of combination of, opportunities or compensation and, benefits we might end up with. Another thing here to think about is to have a range, right? Like between X and Y is a salary I'd be willing to consider. And a lot of times people will say, I would do X for, if I was taking a job in the nonprofit world, and Y if I was taking a job in the corporate world, or X if, the healthcare premiums were covered, or Y if the healthcare premiums are not well covered, right? So like just thinking about, having a range in there, it gives you a lot of flexibility, and it also like helps you create some priorities for yourself. Another thing that I think is really important, because in the job search process, you may or may not know this, it rains or it pours. It doesn't do anything other than those two things. It's a lot of something or nothing. And you can ask a lot of my clients about that. But what we can do when we have those constraints and we have those priorities, we're not really pursuing perfection or pursuing things that like don't exist, but we are giving ourselves priorities for how to spend our time. And I think that's really important, because landing an aligned role and pursuing, mission aligned work is not about accepting any job offer necessarily. It's really about like being kind of picky and selective. And so even just the order that you prioritize your applications in a week can really reflect what it is that you want. So start with what feels like it's most aligned, and, save those, least aligned roles for when you're running low on energy and focus. And then you've spent your energy working towards something that you really want. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how to create and leverage clarity, and not set the bar for clarity to be certainty. Because a mistake I see a lot of people make, especially when there's like a lot of burnout and disillusionment, and like who is not experiencing that? I don't know. I think most of us have some level of that at the moment. But I really I think that the piece here for me that feels so important is that you're creating an infrastructure for your job search. You're creating some clarity for yourself that you can operationalize. And it gives you kind of a North Star in this process that's going to save you time and save you energy, and make sure that you're moving in the right direction and not spreading yourself too thin, and especially not spreading yourself too thin for opportunities that like aren't going to ultimately resonate with you. The next piece of this, there's always something that follows the internal self-reflection work in our process, and that is the externalization, right? So sharing your value, and in this case, sharing your value and your values. Something I hear quite a bit from my clients, like mission-driven professionals, people who teach, people who are very community-oriented, who are trying to solve collective problems, to do good work, are often the first people who say, I don't like to talk about myself. I am not comfortable, being self-promotional, or tooting my own horn, or taking credit for things. And that can be a very good instinct. I mean, I think we've all seen times when self-promotion has gone a little off the rails, and we wouldn't want to be kind of doing things that made us feel that uncomfortable. On the other hand, there's something here, if we're looking for a place of belonging, like we might be in our work, then it's really important to be seen. And it's our responsibility as job seekers, if that's important to us, to reveal ourselves, right? And to really say something about ourselves that's true and of value. And so I want to really encourage you to find a way to do this that feels good for you. I'm a big fan of the phrase, I'm really proud of, and then like filling in the blank there with something that you're obviously proud of. I don't think it sounds salesy or even promotional. It just gives us a good sense of like what matters to you and the kinds of contributions you're capable of making. So I really encourage you, if you haven't kind of sat with that question and come up with 2 or 3 examples, to do so. When I am interviewing people, when we're doing resume prep, I think of it as interviewing, like I'm collecting information from them. It's a really good opportunity for me to listen to not just like what they're saying, but like, why is that something that they're proud of? Because it's not always just the outcome of something that they're proud of. In fact, sometimes it's like a messy situation, but they're proud of how they handled it, or the approach they took to solve the problem. There's something about their values wrapped up in that story, not just their value. And so I want you to sit with that question and see what examples you come up with. The good news is, we don't have to be super creative in the job search process to find ways to talk about our value and our values. There's very clear structure for doing this. There's a resume, there's a LinkedIn profile and LinkedIn activity and content. There's your informational interviews, there's networking conversations, there's actual interviews. So we're not really reinventing the wheel, but some of that really good content is likely missing from these components if you haven't really infused these pieces with your impact and what matters most to you. I think it's a relief to have the structure in place. Like if I had to just come up with some like ambiguous, like a TikTok resume or something like that, that would probably stress me out. But I do think that practicing conveying your values in writing and even speaking out loud can be helpful. So looking at qualifications on jobs and really thinking about how you meet those qualifications, even if you are coming from a different line of work, ask yourself, how do I meet these qualifications? Not just, oh, I don't, or I don't like this, or I don't quite. Like, think about what you have to offer, not just, that you don't have anything to offer. We can really get clear on our messaging too and do that translational work. I was just doing this on a client's resume this morning. Of really thinking about what is the language that you're hearing? How are they talking about their stakeholders? Are they users? Are they students? Are they customers? Are they clients? Embodying some of that language back at people can really help them feel like they're being heard. And I think that can be a really good strategy to help communicate our value and our values as well. I'm a big fan of talking to yourself, talking out loud when no one's around, maybe like put on photo booth or Zoom and just with yourself, like watch yourself on video, get more comfortable. Repetition is so key. So the more that you can do this, the easier it will be to have these conversations. Even in writing, the easier it will get over time. So I really want you to think about, once you have kind of the clarity piece, the conveying it is really important. An important metric for me hi, Nicole, in terms of the resume is also how excited my clients feel about it. So a lot of times when I'm working on resumes with clients, they will say to me, how is this? But what I really want to hear is like, how do you feel about that? Like, do you feel excited about it? And I have to say, even though we're the subject matter experts on resumes, people have like, people are excited when they have a good resume. The difference between like, I think this is fine, and like, wow, I'm excited to apply for that role is pretty significant. So they may not have the skill to kind of get their resume where they want it to go, but they know when it's there. Like they can really feel that difference. And that's what I really want for everyone, is like to know how to use your resume to really convey what you have to offer. Because when you know how to do that, it gives you tremendous flexibility. It allows you to say what's important to you in ways, that are calm and strategic and professional. And I think sometimes people are worried that, what they want might sound too contentious, or they're afraid to ask for it. There's lots of ways to do this professionally. So if you're not there yet, here's a shameless plug. We've got a couple spots left in our fall job search accelerator. And most of the people who join us for those 4 weeks will be spending time really refining their resume and LinkedIn and sort of the way they're presenting themselves, so that they can get some traction and put forward language that's going to help them resonate, not just that's reflective of their experience, but that ideally is like a marriage between the two. All right. So we've talked about getting clarity ourselves. We've talked about how to convey values and value throughout the process. So let's talk a little bit about this next piece that I think is important, which is building and leveraging relationships for connection and support. And most importantly, in this case, with mission-aligned work, which is insight. I talk about networking a lot when I pop on here. I think relationship building and connection is really at the core of everything, quite frankly. But one thing that I think is super valuable to keep in mind when we're talking about relationship building or relationships with regard to finding mission-aligned work is the level of information and insight that people have about potential companies or lines of work that you might be interested in exploring. So we're always kind of hearing like networking is how you get jobs, but networking is also how you decide if you want to take a job, if you know how to use your network right. And oftentimes, like I know in my career, like I would much rather have a 15-minute conversation with someone who's worked with a potential boss or worked at a potential company than to go to the trouble of actually applying for the job first. Like it was always really important to me that a place feel like a good place to work, that a team be a good place to be. And it's not just about landing the job, it's about figuring out if the job is even worth applying to or accepting. So as we progress in our careers, I think these relationships become just a more valuable asset, and you should be planting a lot of seeds. Like I know Pamela's here. She knows I say this all the time. We're planting seeds, and we're not harvesting on the same day. Like we're really thinking about, what is the long term here, even if we don't have a long-term vision. And so whether you are someone who has a lot of relationships that can be sort of harvested at this moment, or if you are someone planting, or ideally doing both, right? This is a real critical piece of the mission aligned job search, because people can find out things about jobs you cannot find out on job postings. And maybe you can't even find out on Glassdoor. You can really get a lot more detail, a lot more insight, a lot more intel. I was just talking to a client earlier this week who's having a conversation with someone who's retiring at a potential employer or target company. And I was like, awesome. Like people about to retire are, very candid. And that's what we want. We want candid information. So much of the job search, like the hiring process, is really like employer branding. I mean, you're getting treated really well, ideally, but you're not necessarily seeing what people are like in real life. And that's why those relationships and those kind of connections can just be so important. They can tell you if the workplace is diverse. They can tell you if they're making strides in those kind of goals. They can tell you, what the work-life balance is actually like in ways that like employers may or may not be self-aware to do. So that's a really important piece of this, is that we don't just need people to help us get jobs. We need people to share information with us. We need people who can make connections, introductions, so that we can talk to people who can share information with us and help us make decisions that really feel like they are in alignment with what we believe and what we want to do and how we want to work. Okay. Another piece of this that I think is super important, still planting lots of seeds. Honestly, like I wish I had more time to just plant seeds, because I think it's so important to have those relationships at the ready. And you never know, you have to build relationships not knowing what the end goal is going to be. And that can make it really difficult to prioritize. So the degree to which you can just keep planting and, keep connecting, I think is a very, very good strategy. So hang in there, Pam. All right, asking or negotiating for what you want is a really big part of this process. And there's a couple of reasons. One, I think just going through the act of asking about things that matter to you or negotiating on an offer can tell you a lot about a potential employer and what it might be like to work there. Are they hostile to the things that matter to you when you ask about them? Or are they like extremely understanding and eager to get you the information you need to make a decision? Of course, there's like a range of things that could happen in there, but like those are obviously the two scenarios that come to most people's minds most often. So I think going into this interview and just, yesing everyone to death isn't a good way. It might be a good way to land a job, but it's not necessarily a good way to land a job that's a great fit. So this is where we need to like really practice a little discernment and advocate for ourselves. And so there are different ways that you can do this if necessary, but here are just some things to think about. If an interview time really isn't going to work for you, I want you to consider asking for a different time, letting people know you're in a meeting and can't get out of it. What are the other options? Clarifying a salary range or hiring timeline before you commit to a long process, right? Like you might want to know, like, is this going to be somewhere in my acceptable salary range? It's okay to ask that if that's going to help you decide if you want to pursue the role or not. Letting people know, I would like to be considered for this role. It's very compelling, but this is at the bottom of my range. That's also something that's okay to say. Taking a moment to gather your thoughts before responding to a complicated question or a question you haven't thought of before, that's okay. So I just kind of want to give you permission to like think about what it is that you need as you're navigating this process, and pay attention to how people respond if you give yourself the opportunity, to get what you need here. A lot of times it goes really, really well for clients. I did have one client, I think I've told the story here before, but she did ask about some unpleasant Glassdoor reviews. And, I thought that was a brave thing to do. And it was so interesting. I don't think she'd say she regretted asking about it because there was a little hostility in the response. And of course that was like an unpleasant interaction, but it also gave her so much clarity about whether or not she wanted to pursue a role at that company. People can look at, Glassdoor reviews that are super unflattering and say like, we had a problem, here's how we're dealing with it. Or they can be like, what problem? We have no idea what you're talking about. And so, you get to decide in this process, like that's information. It might be disappointing information, but I'd rather kind of encourage you to engage with disappointing information so that A, you know what you're in for, or B, you can turn your attention elsewhere. A lot of clients, I'm talking about finding things that are mission aligned, but let me just say that we've had a good amount of clients take jobs that are at organizations that they know are going to be challenging, because they're ready for that kind of challenge, because they asked about the red flags, they heard the red flags, and they were like, I want a chance at this. And I think that's really important. Like if that's the kind of hurdle that you want to face next in your career, if that is a strength of yours, like some people have infinite patience. Like I'm terrible. I don't have infinite patience, but some people are really great at being patient and helping organizations move in the right direction. I'm self-employed, so that tells you how much patience and collaborative energy I have for that sort of thing. So I think that you have to really know yourself here. And so I'm not saying you should run, but I think if you see red flags, but you should assess, like, is this a challenge I am, eager to tackle or willing to tackle? Maybe there's other pieces that are compelling there. A couple other final pieces here. Walking away from opportunities that aren't a good fit. I just saw a client do this last week. And what was kind of fun about watching her do that, she hadn't actually really walked away from a job offer before. But it's really hard to get an aligned job if you take the first thing that comes along. Now, obviously, I want you to be safe and secure. And so if you need to take a job because that's how we get access to healthcare and money in this country, please take care of yourself. Basic needs are allowed to be a priority. But I've also seen a lot of people, continue their job search when they've landed some kind of bridge job. And so walking away is one option, but also continuing your job search or having a plan for how to leverage this opportunity into something that's going to be a better fit. I've seen people, for example, who've had really long gaps, take a job that was like less than ideal for them, but it gave them an opportunity to reestablish themselves, to learn skills, to, meet new people, to establish their professional network and make a transition from there. So when I say walk away from opportunities that are a good fit, this is why your priorities need to be at the center of that. Getting back into the workforce is a reasonable priority. Getting a paycheck, also a reasonable priority. And if that feels frustrating or still disappointing to you, I want you to think like, what's your plan for the job? Like how can you leverage this? What does this set you up for? What else can you do to kind of position yourself longer term in the direction you ultimately want to be in? Okay, I love it when I take notes on things to say and then I just completely ignore them during these actual sessions. Hope there's nothing really, really good in here. A couple of other things here as we're wrapping up. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now because I just have a couple more tips. I think that longevity in the job search is not anything anyone desires, but a willingness to hold out for the right thing or an ability to hold out for the right thing, it can be worth its weight in gold in sort of getting you to the next step and having that be something that you're really excited about. So to that end, taking breaks from the job search process, caring for other aspects of your life, having a plan to re-engage the job search process. That's my favorite new way to talk about this. I have a lot of clients who are like, I have to start over. We are re-engaging the job search process. It's really important, I think, to not be job searching 24/7, 365. It's very tempting, and there are moments where I think we all would put a lot of energy into it, but taking breaks, taking care of yourself, engaging with other responsibilities, having a plan for re-engagement can give you a longer runway to ultimately make a better long-term decision for yourself, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a very good thing. We try to avoid, being in a place of urgency when we make big decisions, if we can help it. And so taking breaks, re-engaging, doing other things in our life allow us to kind of be in a place where we can make decisions that we're proud of here. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you got a couple of good nuggets on how to reorient, potentially re-engage your job search process. If you're watching the replay or you're here now, feel free to drop any questions or comments in the chat and I will respond once we wrap up here. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you have a really good rest of your week and don't hesitate to be in touch if there's anything that we can do to help you with your job search. Talk to you all soon.